Welcome back to our course on Python. Now we will discuss nested classes. It is clear from the naming, we have an outer class and inside it we will have an inner class. So we create a class named book, which is the outer class, and we will define the init function, the constructor here, which is automatically called on creating each instance. We introduce three other arguments, which are the title of the book, author, and the type of the book, scientific fiction, whatever. And now we assign the variable self.title to the attribute which we will receive, title. Let's have the class book as such for now, and let's create an inner class called Book Data. So we have class, capital letter for the class name, Book Data. Our colon here, and let's have our constructor for this init class, define the init function, and let's introduce those two arguments here. Now we should point out for now that author and type do not have the same color as title. This means that the class book doesn't recognize author and title. After defining our constructor here, let's assign the variable self.author to the attribute author. Similarly, assign self.type to the attribute type, and we notice here that the color of the argument author changed the moment we assign the variable self.author to the attribute author. This will happen with self.type. We assign it to the attribute type, and the colors are changed. Inside the inner class book data, let's define another function called display book data. And here's our self. What will this function do? It will print some data concerning our book. Using the f string here, author equals and placeholder self dot author, and the type equals placeholder self dot type. Now we have an outer class called book with a constructor of parameters title, author, type, where author and type are the arguments of the inner class book data. Now we need to call the inner class book data inside the outer class book. This is done by creating an object self.data. You call it whatever you like, which calls the inner class book data using self. And we pass the arguments author and type here. And once they are passed, we recognize that author and type in the constructor of the class book, the outer class book, changed their color, as now the outer class book can recognize them. This is because the inner class is called with its arguments. Now let's create our first object, say book 1. We create the book by calling the outer class book and assigning the attributes to the arguments. So we have the title, the screw tape letters, we have our author, C.S. Lewis, and we have the type fiction. Now we can claim that we have full data about the book that can satisfy our arguments. Now let's point out that book 1 cannot call any function from the inner class, as the inner class is passed inside the outer class. So we need a function in the outer class to be executed. Let's define the function display book. You call it whatever you like. What does this function do? It prints some data concerning the book. So we have our F, our quotations. Title is a placeholder here. Self.title. And now we have an outer class function which uses title as an argument, and we have an inner class function display book which uses the arguments or attributes author and type. But we know that author and type are recognized by the outer class since it called book data, the inner class. So after creating book 1, the instance book 1, it can call the function display book of the outer class. Let's have a run here now. It prints title is the screw tape letters. And we really should introduce a space here after is to have a better output. Let's run again. Yes, the title is the screw tape letters. To have data about the author and the type, we need self.data. Here self.data. And we need the function display book data, which has the author and the type from the inner class. Now let's have our run here. Yes, author C.S. Lewis and type is function. What is the syntax really here? The object created in the constructor of the outer class dot the method of the inner class. Here we are. Let's sum it up. We call the inner class book data to create self.data, which is the object here. Self.bookData calls the constructor of the inner class book data. We use the object created in the outer class to call the display method of the inner class. The display book data method is an instance method, therefore it has a self here. The instance book 1 is created through the outer class book, and it has the ability to call any function in the outer class using the syntax instance.outerClass function. This concludes with our video here concerning nested classes. In the second video, we will have another example.